Good morning. Welcome to ACSA's second webinar, part of a four-part series. My name is Martha Alvarez, and I'm here with Jeff Brashears from the Department of Education. This is one of ACSA's webinars to talk about the new accountability system and how the LCAP is part of the new system that California has developed. We wanted to talk to Jeff today about the revisions that the State Board and the California Department of Education are engaging in. The State Board of Education is expected to adopt the new revised LCAP at the November meeting, and it will be in effect for the 17-18 school year. So thank you, Jeff, for being here with us today.
My pleasure, thank you.
We hope this will be an interactive discussion with you. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box. We want to hear your comments. The Department of Education is interested in getting your input to consider any additional changes to the LCAP. And lastly, we also have documents you can download on the right-hand side of the screen. We have the revised LCAP template. Again, it's subject to additional modifications, but it's there for your use, and also the PowerPoint if you wanted to take notes along the way. We'll be getting started with a couple of just a preview of what the new accountability system will look like and how it's tied to the work that Jeff and the Department of Education is undertaking with the LCAP redesign. So there's really important, I think, to keep in mind that alignment, it's critical, it's integral part of the new LCAP, the evaluation rubrics, and how it ties into LCFF. The main portion of the webinar will be focusing on the LCAP, and that'll be Jeff's portion that he'll cover. And then we'll also briefly at the end talk about future webinars that ACSA will be hosting on the new accountability system. As I mentioned, it's really important to keep in mind that the new part of the new accountability system, it's embedded in two key aspects. The evaluation rubrics, which we'll be talking about shortly, and then the LCAP template, which Jeff will elaborate in a few moments. This is part of LCFF, the coming together of both efforts. As you can see in this slide from the Department of Education, the idea is that as you adopt your LCAP at the July 1st timeline every year, you will be able to start implementing your goals, actions, and services throughout that first few months of the new school years. Then sometime in the fall, you'll be able to receive data about the different student performance metrics that we'll be covering in a future slide. You'll be able to reflect on your student demographic data, their performance on different indicators, and then be able to use that data to better align with your efforts in the LCAP through that annual stakeholder process. And I think this is really important about the interaction between the evaluation rubrics and the LCAP. And Jeff perhaps will be talking about that as part of the LCAP redesign. This is part of the evaluation rubrics format with the State Board of Education adopted at the last meeting in September 2 weeks ago. There'll be a report document that you'll be able to download both for a local educational agency and for a school site specific information about your student demographics, how they're doing on different indicators, and being able to identify any performance gaps that students may have. There'll also be information about how the state indicators and how the local performance indicators interact with each other. The one question that remains to be seen is whether the state will be developing any reporting capability for your school districts to compare to others in the local county or region. And these reports will be available to you starting in November, and that information will be pre-populated by the Department of Education by January of 2017. The purpose of the rubrics is for these three different areas. It's to help school districts, charter schools, and county offices to identify or evaluate their strengths, weaknesses, and areas needing improvement. The other piece is for the county superintendents and the role that they have in supporting school districts and charter schools who may need technical assistance. And then lastly is the state superintendent's ability to support schools that may need additional intervention if student performance is not progressing. A couple more slides before I turn it over to Jeff to really talk about the LCAP redesign. As part of the rubrics, there will be 5 key state indicators that the State Board adopted at the meeting last month, or this month actually in September. One of them will be student test scores for grades 3 to 8th, also grade 11th for English language arts and math. Progress of English learners towards English language proficiency. high school graduation rate looking at a 4-year cohort rate, suspension rate by local educational agency type and school type, and lastly, the State Board will be adopting a college and career readiness indicator to determine students' readiness to go on to college or career. And this will be information data that's pre-populated by the state and will be available again to inform the LCAP engagement process. One example of how the information will be available to school districts will be, and other stakeholders, there'll be information looking at the status, where your school students, your performance, your school district is at, and also looking at change, the progress made from the past year to the prior year to the current year, or looking at a 3-year average. And what this grid shows as an example for the college and career performance categories, there'll be different color-coded information to determine the performance of that subgroup. And then lastly, there's also, as part of the new evaluation rubrics, there's information about the other LCFF priorities that are not part of the state indicators. School districts will still continue to be collecting information about these remaining priorities as you see them listed on this screen. ACSA will be having a webinar on the local performance priorities this afternoon at 1:30 p.m. if you wish to join us for that webinar and learn more about them. But they will also be part of the LCAP and the different evaluation criteria. And with that, before I turn it over to Jeff, I want to just remind you that we want this to be an interactive conversation. If you have any comments, questions, concerns you want Jeff and the Department of Education to keep in mind, please type them in the chat box, and we'll be making sure that Jeff can help answer some of those questions and comments. Thank you.
Good morning. So we're going to discuss this morning, if you will, LCAP template 3.0. The first iteration was the emergency regulations template, and then the current template that we're in, which was adopted by the State Board, and now we're looking to revise the template to this current that we're seeking feedback in this iteration. Some of the changes is the new outline of the template. We've added a plan summary that's required as adopted and given the direction from the State Board in its May meeting. And then you can see the order. The new order here is the plan summary. We've changed the annual update to precede the stakeholder engagement session, then the actions, goals, actions, and services, and then the demonstration of increased or improved services for unduplicated pupils. So some of the highlights, as you'll see, is a new design. It's a little easier on the eye, aesthetically pleasing, some more white space, and just easier to see. You'll notice that the formerly known as 3A, 3B has been changed to the title is to the demonstration of increased or improved services. The instructions have been clarified, and also those two sections, 3A and 3B, have been combined. We've moved the directions per feedback from the stakeholders to out. They're not embedded in the template anymore. They're back to in the back as an addendum, as well as definitions. And then in appendices, we have the state priorities 5 and 6 rate calculations, and also the guiding questions have been moved to an appendices. So here's the look of the plan summary that's been added. We have a focus statement here that is just talk about 2 or 3 short sentences, focusing on your students, moving to some key objectives, taking from all of your goals and kind of combining down what is the main priority, or what are the objectives within the LCAP and at the LEA level. And then we have summary of progress. I just talked about a brief description of the ability to tell your story, the development, how the focus has affected the development of your goals, and then also to discuss the increase for improved services that you have made within your LEA and at the LCAP. Then you have the ability to discuss and share with your stakeholders in the LEA your greatest successes. You'll see the colors blue and green. Those are tied to the evaluation rubrics in the top level display. And then also have the ability to talk about your greatest needs. And again, it's tied to the red and orange. The color is tied to the evaluation rubrics. And then also you have the ability to additionally to identify the state indicators where student performance is really not where you want them to be, calling it at this point the equity box, and just talk about what you're going to do and how you're going to make the changes within your actions and services and goals to improve student performance at these levels.
Jeff, so one question I have, how long do you anticipate the plan summary to be ideally? Like, let's say there's an LCAP that's 35 pages. Is there a proportion that it shouldn't be longer than a page or two? Any thoughts about the length?
I would say it's brief. It really is for the stakeholders to be able to access the LCAP. It's kind of the story, tell the story, a novel, if you will, but it's maybe a novelette, kind of a short. There's no discussion of word count or limiting of the word count, but just brief. The first prompt was in 1 to 3 sentences, briefly described. It's just truly a brief description. And you can see here down at the bottom of the box, it says, again, briefly describe. It is not supposed to be intended to restate the entire LCAP, but just kind of tell the story and give people the ability to understand what is in the LCAP without, if they want to, absolutely go further into the LCAP and tell that story. And then part of this also, as the plan summary continued, is to talk about just the dollars that are included in the LCAP and the dollars within the LEA as well. The total general budget, the projected funds, the LCFF funds for the LCAP year, and then also the dollars that are budgeted for the planned actions and services within the goals within the LCAP.
Will any of this information be pre-populated from other sections of the LCAP?
At this point, no.
Okay.
And certainly part of, as we develop the electronic template, some of the, as you'll see in other parts of the template, there would be the ability to pre-populate and to move some of the information from one section to the other with the anticipation with the e-template.
And a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions or comments for Jeff on the Department of Education, please type them in the chat box and we'll have Jeff answer them.
And then moving on to the annual updates, not really a lot of changes other than the look of it from the current iteration of the annual update. Here it's kind of in 2 sections, but here it's just talking about the goal, the priorities that are identified, and then the expected annual measurable outcomes, and then those actual outcomes. Also within is the planned actions and services and the actual, what did you plan to do, what were you able to do, and then the expenditures, also the budgeted expenditures, and then the actual or estimated actual, knowing that when you write an LCAP, it's at a different point in time for each LEA, so it's hard to get an actual of an expenditure based on the time of the year, so it's an estimated actual, which is identified in the instructions. And then the last part of the annual update is we've moved the prompts into 4 distinct prompts in 4 boxes to talk about just the changes that you've, as part of your evaluation process, what are you going to change to your goals, actions, or services. And then also to talk about the overall effectiveness. And this is the intent here, is not to talk about each and every action and service that you've articulated in your LCAP, but rather the group of actions and services and how, if you will, how are you moving the needle towards student engagement. So it's not a one-to-one action or group of actions and services, but overall, how are you effectively trying to reach your goal. And then also here is also, it's not a to the dollar type of ask, but explain any differences, any significant changes or differences between your budgeted expenditures and then your estimated actual expenditures. Say you're going to hire 10 counselors, but you only hired 5. There's a lack of expenditures, or you didn't spend as much as you budgeted, and just a brief explanation of that difference. And then again, describe any changes you've made to the goal. That's not a new prompt, it's in the current template. And then identify any of those changes and what can you do as part of your evaluation process. The stakeholder engagement has been changed, from 4 boxes to 2. We've moved to a horizontal orientation, as you can see. A lot of talk about either a horizontal or vertical alignment between these 2 boxes, and it's kind of a 50-50 out there as far as feedback. So we landed at this point on a horizontal engagement. The engagement process is not changed. These are the groups with which the LEA should consult with in developing their LCAP. And then also how, as part of that consultation engagement process, how did they affect the development of the LCAP? So there's been quite a few changes to the goals, actions, and services template in this section of the LCAP template, these tables. We've added the new, modified, and unchanged. That's a part of the evaluation process. Again, did you make any changes to your goal? Did you write a new goal? Did you modify it, or is it unchanged? And just let the stakeholders know as part of this transparency aspect of the LCAP. Here again, the identified need, how did you come up with it, and what priorities are the goals related to? Again, local priorities are very helpful at the local level, and you can see some examples. Character building technology plans. It's a good use, and I would say in the past what we've seen that the local priorities is really an underused aspect of the LCAP. And then the expected annual measurable outcomes. Here you can see that you have the ability to identify the metrics or indicators that you're trying to move with this goal. You'll see a new box as the baseline. And that is, you're going to take it's still under where the data you pull from the data, it's in the instructions. It could be the most current data that you have for the metrics that you're going to identify and hope to change in the goal. But the baseline will remain unchanged throughout the 3-year LCAP. So this is to show where you started at this 3-year LCAP, and then the ability to show those changes over the 3 years in 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20.
Jeff, could you spend a moment clarifying how it's different than the prior LCAP? So there had been the concept about doing a static LCAP in this new version versus what we used to have. How is that different in moving forward?
So it is a static LCAP. It is for a period of 3 years, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20. And so you'll see, like here in the measurable outcomes, you have the ability to, one, identify the levels of growth over the 3 years that you hope to identify. In the stakeholder engagement back, we could go back, maybe. We can because we have the technology. So the stakeholder engagement, you can see that you identify the school year of which you're talking about the stakeholder engagement. And actually the intent on the stakeholder engagement was you would overwrite this year over year and just talk about the current year, but you would identify what year that you're talking about within the template. So you'll see other aspects, but it is within the ability to the LCAPs it is a 3-year static plan. And when you make some changes to the goals, actions, and services, here again you'll see as we move to the actions and services what you may or may not change as a result of your annual update. So the student serves, there's a couple combinations. One, if an action or services is going to be counted for increase or improving services requirement, they'll check the boxes. Later on you'll see in the template two down, but here you'll complete this for any actions or services for all students or the students except for that's going to be identified as contributing to meeting the needs of the requirements of increased or improved services. Location will be for all actions and services, either all schools or specific schools or grade spans. And then here you will identify any action or service that you count toward, or the LEA will count toward meeting the increased or improved services requirement. They'll identify the subgroup or the unduplicated student group or groups that these are focused for. And then if they choose to implement an LEA-wide or school-wide, they would choose that scope of service here. Again, which one is identified and serving these unduplicated student groups. These metrics and actions and services, this is a box where you would articulate the actions and services. And again, you can see the new, the modified, or unchanged within the actions or services. And again, that's part of the annual update. Is this action or service new? Did you change it? Or is it unchanged based on just, we're on track, this is where we want to go. And then budgeted expenditures. It's just oriented the same information that's required in the current LCAP template, discrete boxes, the ability to identify the amount, the funding source, and then also the budget reference. Where can you find these funds and this fund source within the budget? I would go back to Here, the actions and services, this is not intended to be a single action or service within each box. You certainly can group action or actions and services that best moves the needle or best addresses the metrics. So it's not just landscape-wise, it would take up a lot of real estate if you had each box and each cell here to address just a single action. So you can group actions or services that are related to those metrics.
So just to clarify then, if the district had, let's say, 3 goals, they would be completing the same information for each of the 3 goals, and depending on the number of actions and services, they may need to duplicate the boxes, or they could add it to the same box.
Absolutely. So you would have each actions and services identified to the goals. So if you had 3 goals, you would have at least 3 different actions and services moving to. And if you had a group of action or actions or services, you could, if they're related, you could put them in the same cell. Where did it go? Cell here. And then also you would have the ability to, these boxes are expandable also, so you would be able to put in different amounts from different fund sources, and also where you could find them within the budget.
So a question to the audience, this section of the LCAP has been one of the most that has been significantly modified since the current version that we've seen in the 16-17 school year. Is there any feedback you have for Jeff and the Department of Education regarding the changes you see here, additional clarifications that may need to happen, what you like about this new version, since there will still be continued to be conversations about potential changes in an effort to make it more simple and clear to the public. So that's a question to the audience. I don't know, Jeff, if you wanted to ask any specific questions regarding any feedback you're looking to get on this section.
I think overall, as you're seeing this and going through this, if you just see your overall reaction to it, the changes, good, bad, ugly, whatever feedback you have, and then also if you feel that it is adding to or taking away from or helping to mitigate the thought of this being a compliant document, is this simpler, is this just an overall reaction? And then any specific questions that are unclear, we'd love to hear. Just any type of feedback that you have for us would be great. We know that we're kind of embedded in this, and we had some conversations yesterday, and a question was really a telling question, and we're so sometimes so buried into it that we forget to see the details. And so any questions and any feedback would be highly welcomed. And then here is the formerly known as 3A and 3B. It's the demonstration of increased or improved services for unduplicated pupils. Again, you can see the LCAP year and talking about what year you're going. The intent here is to, as opposed to the stakeholder engagement where you could rewrite year over year, we hope the expectation would be to keep these pages and these discussions historically over the 3-year period. Here you're describing how the services provided for unduplicated pupils, students are meeting the increased or improved services requirement. It's combined again from last over the current iteration. And also, if you remember back in the goals, actions, and services where you would identify if this action or service is contributing to meeting the increased or improved services, the expectation would not be to have to list all the actions and services here or the dollar amount here, but make reference back to those actions and services that you've identified within the LCAP and have that discussion how it meets the needs. So that's the revamp, if you will, and the redesign of the LCAP template. Certainly, again, happy to answer any questions if they're there.
Is there a section in the revised LCAP where there's a reference to the evaluation rubrics data? And as I mentioned at the beginning of the PowerPoint, one of the efforts between the work of the Department of Education and the State Board is to better align and integrate the data and student performance on the different state indicators to help the school districts, governing board members, superintendents, stakeholders understand the performance levels of students.
Right.
Is there a reference in the LCAP that would make that connection so school districts can help reflect on their data to help inform their decisions on spending and goals and services?
Yeah, so in the plan summary, when there was a reference to the red and the green and talk about the successes and identified needs, those colors are actually in direct reference to the evaluation rubrics, and the colors that are on the the top-level display of the evaluation rubrics. And then in the annual update, the question, the prompts are talking about based on the data from the evaluation rubrics and along with other local data and the data from your actions and services, it ties to asking about the data identified in the evaluation rubrics. How does that impact what you're going to do moving forward? Yes.
And will it be focused on all student group performance or only on those student groups that might be on the orange or red categories?
I think it is all students, and it is, again, it's a prompt to just help move the conversation with the LEAs of how they're doing based on the data, again, on local data, on data that they have on the actual actions and services, and then the data identified in the evaluation rubrics to help drive that conversation and make any changes based on the needs that they've identified based on all data.
Great. And to the public, for those of you that joined us a few minutes later, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that the State Board adopted the new accountability system 2 weeks ago at the last board meeting. And part of those performance categories that I'm talking to Jeff about, there'll be a five colors. The red and it would be red and orange at the bottom, followed by yellow, green, and blue. And the aspiration for California students would be that they would all get to green at some point in time, with the goal of closing the achievement gap and helping students make annual progress. So this is really an effort to integrate both the student performance metrics. As Jeff mentioned, there'll be boxes on the LCAP where the district will be able to identify those metrics they're looking at and tying it back to the LCAP work. So definitely we want to hear from the audience, those of you who are participating on the webinar, any questions or comments you might have. I think also concerns that you may want to convey to the Department of Education. They've been very open to the feedback they have received from different stakeholders. They'll continue to do meetings and webinars with other stakeholders throughout the next week and a half. And I think it's really, I would say, Jeff, thank you for being open to all of these comments from the practitioners who are the ones ultimately developing the LCAP.